Whenever, and I'm gonna mute myself.
Sounds good.
I'm just wearing the mask for clothing compatibility.
All right, everyone, we're getting ready to start the first session of the second day of RacketCon. The stream appears to be on. I'm going to go make an announcement in the gather space, and then we'll get started. Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's time now for the next session, the first session of the day. The live stream is on. You can see that it's updated. You can also go to Racket's YouTube channel, and you can see screen there. All right, there was a little bit of a problem with the YouTube page. I posted a link into the gather in case anyone can't find the thing. Of course, if you're hearing me, you have found it, but nevertheless, yeah, there we go. So this morning, we've got 2 activities. So the first is that we're going to have a presentation from Sam on the State of Racket in 2021. And then after that, we're going to have a sort of a town hall meeting where we'll, answer any questions from the community about the state of Racket, things that are going on, etc. And questions for both of these will be done through the the Google Doc, and from, if you want, you can post it into the Gather space as well. So I've got with me here Sam and Matthew. Sam, you want to say hi?
Should I get started?
No, I was just saying, say hi.
Hi.
Okay. And
Hi, everyone.
And Matthew's here as well.
Good morning. Hi.
And so we'll first do Sam's presentation, and then we'll do the town hall and Q&As. So I'm going to make sure that all of the spotlighting is in the correct place. So just make sure on the stream that's correct. I think I've got to turn off my video. All right, take it away, Sam.
I'm not visible on the stream, just so you know.
Yeah, I noticed that. I don't see how to change that because you, I've actually pinned you, but I can only get it to show either only you or only the screen. So I don't really know. When it was just me, it would show my video on top of yours, but I can't get it to show your video on top of your own. So sorry about that.
Okay.
We'll just have to imagine what Sam looks like.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone, and welcome to day 2 of RacketCon. I have the honor of talking to everyone about the state of Racket in 2021. So if I was giving the real state of the union, I would say the state of Racket is strong, which I think is also true of Racket. Racket's doing great. We have a lot to celebrate in 2021, and that starts with the release of Racket 8.0. So in the last year, we've released the next major version of Racket, which makes Shea Scheme the default backend. That's been, I think, a huge success. Everything's working really smoothly, and we've successfully released on time 8.1, 8.2, and just yesterday, 8.3. So we should all be extremely pleased and proud with the work that went into this big improvement in the Racket ecosystem and the Racket development possibilities and future. So let's all give ourselves a big round of applause. Okay, I think there's lots of possibilities that the creation of Racket on Shea opens up, and we're just starting to scratch the surface of some of those as they develop. So there's lots of cool things to do, and we'll continue seeing the benefits of the development of Racket on Shea over many years to come in the future of Racket. So I'm going to break up my talk the same way I did last year when I was giving the state of Racket. I'm going to talk about code, I'm going to talk about community, and I'm going to talk about things that are coming soon. And things that you can look forward to in the upcoming year or further future of Racket. So first, code. I think the big themes this year in the Racket development have been compatibility and consolidation. So just as an example, we spent a very large amount of time since the last RacketCon making sure that absolutely everything we knew about worked on Racket CS prior to the release of Racket 8.0. That involved looking at a huge number of different packages, building every single package that's made available in the Racket community. You can see in this screen that there were 75 packages that we looked at that had problems. We fixed almost all of them. And there's just a few remaining that don't work on Racket CS for various fundamental reasons. Of course, those packages still work just fine on Racket BC. And I noticed just this morning, while I was taking a look at this issue, that 2 of them have now been fixed since the last time I looked. So compatibility continues to improve. We continue to see basically everything in our community has made successfully the transition from Racket BC to Racket CS. So that's a really great sign of the strength and health of our community and of the success of Racket CS and Racket at building a backwards compatible system and ecosystem. Another big improvement that we've spent a lot of time on is simplifying, making it easier to work with Racket. That involves things like an easier build process and improved documentation for building and contributing to Racket. And that goes through everything from a new Shea scheme backend that features portable bytecode to make bootstrapping easier, to an extensive build guide, to new makefile targets to rebuild the bootstrapping elements of Racket CS. It's also been a focus on more platforms, particularly more platforms for Racket CS, ranging from Apple Silicon to older platforms running BSDs that had various build problems. We've moved and reorganized the Racket repository, moving some more packages into the main Racket repository to make development easier, as well as integrating the Racket fork of Shea scheme into the main Racket repository, all in the goal of making it easier to compile Racket, develop Racket on new platforms, contribute to Racket, and generally making all the work that we're trying to do easier. There's been one big change in the implementation of the core of Racket, and that's a change coming out in Racket 8.3, released just yesterday. That change is that we've removed the arming and disarming system for syntax objects. Previously, when you tried to take apart a piece of syntax, it might or might not be armed, which meant that you couldn't use some parts of that syntax in context outside of where it originally came from. The reason for this was to attempt to enforce some security properties where macros that were defined in one context, in a trusted context, couldn't be used from untrusted code, for example, code in a sandbox, in order to circumvent the guarantees that the sandbox was trying to enforce. So for example, if the for macro expands to some unsafe code to go faster, being able to use the for macro shouldn't grant you the power to use unsafe code anywhere in your program. Unfortunately, it turns out that there's a lot of holes to plug if you try to make this work. And while we've spent many years trying to make this work, it's become clear that this is a losing game to play. And so we've moved to a simpler system that simply is somewhat more restrictive about macros, but does not have the need to constantly try to make workarounds to make the arming and disarming system more secure. Matthew wrote a long email describing the details of this change, but hopefully the new system will be both simpler and more secure for people to use. Another aspect of making things easier to run and to build is the new RenkoCross package. RenkoCross is a new tool for installing and running variants of Racket. Now that can mean something as easy as running an old version of Racket easily with one line on any program you want, but it can also mean building cross compilers, compiling programs that you have for other machines, for other architectures, and just a general way of managing cross compilation and tooling that handles downloading, building, installing, and everything that you might want for you. I think as this tool continues to gain features and be more widely used, it's going to be even easier to build portable Racket applications for whatever platform that you want to build, and to test and run your Racket program on a wide variety of platforms and for Racket versions. Of course, one thing that I wanted to check was last year I showed the major reduction in C code that we've accomplished by switching to Racket CS, and that number continues to go down, if only by 106 fewer lines this year than last year. So we're continuing to move code out of C and into Racket, and continuing to improve the system while writing less and less C code, everyone's goal. Now I want to talk a little bit about the Racket community and how the things that have changed in the Racket community over the last year. The biggest one that I think is important is the growth of the Racket Discord. So if you haven't joined Discord, it's extremely active. There's tons of people talking about everything from the latest development in the internals to how to write beginner Racket programs, to showing off their latest applications. It's a really fun place to hang out. There's way more messages than I can follow every day, and it's a really exciting place to chat. So in case you don't have enough messaging solutions in your life, join the Racket Discord, check it out, and hear about all the things that people are talking about Racket. Been more competitions, people building quick scripts, the syntax parse B this year. We've had lots of people demonstrating the power of Racket on everything from games to macros to automation scripts. This has been a fun part of the Racket community for the last several years, and it's really cool to see that continue, see new people like Ben Greenman creating new competitions and showing off the power of Racket in a fun way. And we heard some about that in Ben's talk yesterday. We continue to increase the amount of contributions to Racket. We had even more pull requests merged across the Racket organization in 2021 than in 2020. We had significantly more issues closed. A big part of that, the credit goes to Matthew, who went on a streak of fixing small bugs and closing old issues in the Racket repository. But the development velocity in Racket continues to be strong and continues to increase. We're continuing to have strong numbers of contributions, slightly fewer this year than last year. I think last year was an unusual year because of the merge of the Shea Scheme branch. As you can see, when we count new contributions, so we added all the contributions from Shea Scheme last year. This year, we have slightly fewer new contributors, which is unfortunate. We need to continue working on bringing new people into the Racket community, but we've had lots of contributions in the form of talks, projects, exciting applications, and other contributions. Many people are contributing to the Racket project, not just in the Racket Racket repository. The third part of this talk is to talk about exciting new stuff that's coming soon. First thing I want to mention is yet another new way to talk about Racket. As hard as it is for me and other people who've been on the internet for much too long, mailing lists are no longer the most popular way to discuss things on the internet. And we've decided to create an additional forum using the Discourse software. So you can, in fact, go to racket.discourse.group and check that out. We're going to continue using that as a way to asynchronously discuss Racket. Discourse is a system that works well over email in addition to reading it on the web. So if you're the sort of person who funnels everything through your email inbox, Discourse will work well for you as well. So this is a new and exciting way to talk about Racket. This is, I think, a theme. Finding new places and ways to discuss Racket with our friends, with our colleagues, and with the rest of the Racket community is an important part of broadening our community. Another exciting thing that's coming soon is a new expression editor for Racket at the terminal. So based on the Shea Scheme REPL, Matthew's built the X Editor package that does things like syntax highlighting that you can see here, parenthesis matching, proper indentation dependent on the language that you're using, and many other features. So there's lots of cool stuff there, and there's lots of possibility for improving things further, whether that's plugging into tab completion or whether that's improving the editing experience or doing more things. I think this is going to make the Racket redevelopment loop experience even nicer than it has been. So last year, I told you that transient typed Racket was going to show up in the next year. This year, I'm telling you that again, but Ben Greenman's been doing really great stuff. It's really close to being done. And I'm confident that next year, we're going to have different ways of enforcing types at the boundary in typed Racket with different performance trade-offs, including allowing you just not to check those types the way TypeScript does, or to check types in a shallow way following the transient approach to gradual typing that can really reduce a lot of the runtime overhead of using typed Racket. Another exciting feature of typed Racket that's coming is an actual kind system. So this is one of the worst decisions that I made when developing typed Racket, is to not do this. And Fred Fu has been working really hard and built a new system that fixes all these problems in a nice way that avoids breaking existing code as well. So those are two big changes to how people are going to work with Typed Racket, and I think it's going to continue to make Typed Racket a better place to develop your favorite new Racket project. And the other big thing that's coming, even more so in the next year than in the past year, but has had a lot of momentum in the last year as well, is Rhombus. I'm not going to say too much about this because there's 2 talks about this and some discussion later this afternoon. But last year, we were looking at lots of ideas. People were writing lots of issues and pull requests describing the design space. Now there's an actual prototype that you can try out, and people are writing example programs. So Sam Phillips has been doing a great job writing a bunch of programs to try out how Rhombus works and the new shrubbery syntax that's been developed for that. So you can actually see how things work out. I think there's a lot of great stuff there. I'm really excited, and I'm looking forward to hearing Matthew talk more about that later this afternoon. So that's a short summary of what's exciting and what's happened in Racket in 2021. I think the state of Racket is strong, and I'm looking forward to what 2022 is going to bring. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Now, there are a few questions that we'll get started with right away. Lots of people are clapping for you on Gather, by the way. The first question is about the discourse forum that you've mentioned, and we've sent out links to that on Gather and to the existing mailing list. And so someone asked the question, adding discourse to the already fragmented landscape of IRC, mailing lists, Slack, Discord, etc. Is this a good idea? Are we not getting too fragmented? Doesn't it make more sense to have most users in one place?
So I think there's definitely drawbacks to fragmentation, and you can see a recognition of that in the fact that there's only one discourse forum here. We have 2 mailing lists, Racket Dev and Racket Users. I think given the volume of discussion, we don't need multiple groups, and it's often hard for people to figure out which mailing list to post to, so we're going to only one. My personal hope is that we can move away from the mailing lists towards discourse, but that requires community buy-in and community adoption. If everyone hates discourse, then we're not going to get rid of mailing lists. But if we can effectively consolidate there, then we can, in fact, reduce the number of forums that everyone is using.
I feel like I know what I would say about this, Sam, but could you talk a little bit about like why we chose discourse and like how we recognize that this was something that we needed to take a move on in the first place?
Yeah, so
you have been a little bit where you said that, you know, we're old farts who like mailing lists, but ...
Yeah, so one reason to do this is that, like anyone who's been on the Racket mailing list for a while, I've noticed that there's less mailing list traffic than there used to be. And if you're on other mailing lists, you'll notice that that's a trend there too. Mailing lists are just not as popular, and they don't provide the features that people are looking for. One particular feature that our mailing list hosting does not provide, that Discourse can do a better job of, is spam protection. And people who are on the Racket mailing lists will have noticed that we have had some serious spam problems, in particular in Italian. And so that's another reason to move in that direction. So then there's the question of why would we choose Discourse? I think there's a couple reasons. So one other thing that we talked about was GitHub discussions, which Matthew actually set up for Rhombus discussion, and I think has worked pretty well there. But that doesn't provide one central point of discussion, and it doesn't work as well via email, I think. And the other thing we've seen is that lots of other communities have successfully adopted Discourse, in particular other language communities, ranging from Rust to Haskell to OCaml. And that's worked out well in those cases. And so we're happy not to try to innovate in the programming languages discussion technology space, and to adopt best practices that other people have already figured out.
Yeah, and in your answer there, you kind of answered someone's question about the spam problem on the mailing list. And my understanding of this is that basically there's not much we can do given how we're hosting.
Yeah, so the mailing list spam problem is extremely unfortunate. Google Groups does not provide any tools other than banning individual users.
Or doing full-scale moderation.
Yeah, or we could change the whole list to be moderated, which I think would not be the right thing for Racket.
Yeah. Now, someone asked the question, last time I checked Discord, the moderators seem to be very opinionated about what topic is allowed to be discussed. Does that continue to be the case? I think that I should answer this question.
Sure.
So I'm the official owner of the Racket Discord on the Racket Management team side. And we have a team of moderators for the Racket Discord. And there has been a few times where we've had to, discuss as a group of moderators what the rules of conversation are, and what the rules of order that the moderators are empowered to enforce. And if you feel like that, if you feel like there's any problem with the moderation team, please contact the Racket management team and me specifically, and I can address those issues. There was kind of a controversial thing that happened last year, but I think that we dealt with that pretty well. And I think that the moderators on the Discord community did a great job sort of reflecting with one another about what's the right way to run things going forward. So it's definitely a learning experience, and we hope that it's going to be a good place for everybody to have whatever the right kind of conversations they want to have are. Anyone else want to add anything about that on our side?
I'll just say that there's a lot of discussions about all sorts of different things these days on the Racket Discord. So while I'm happy not to have any involvement with moderation and not to have to worry about that, I think the moderation team is doing a good job.
One kind of FYI thing that's relevant to think about a lot is that the moderation has to worry about on Discord is that Discord is far more popular among students than mailing lists. So, occasionally we get people asking questions on the mailing lists, and we have in the past about like doing homework problems, but this is a much, much bigger deal on Discord where it happens a lot, including like, people asking to, hire people and like pay them and stuff to do their homework. And so that's just kind of an example of the kinds of issues that show up in the Discord community that are kind of unique. So those are the 3 questions that we've got so far.
Maybe we should just transition to our town hall, and I'll stop screen sharing here.
So as Sam said, we'll just sort of smoothly transition to the town hall. Here we've got Matthew and Matthias. Also on the management team, we've got Robbie and John, but they're both not available right now. But you know, any questions that you have for you know, the Racket Management group in general, then now is a great time to ask them. Like I said before, you can type them into the Google Doc, or you can put them into the Discord, and we'll notice that as well. You want to say hi, Matthias, now that you're here?
Here. Hi. Sorry, my Gather Town doesn't work, so I was not able, I forgot to log into Sam's State of the Union.
Looking at 3 different text logs and 2 different computers, and someone says, can I ask a question? And I assume that they're typing a question. Okay, so someone asked the question, is there any interest in making Dr. Racket, quote, more hackable? And they don't elaborate what it means for something to be more hackable, but I'm gonna guess that, you know, this is something like you know, Emacs and Vim are very hackable.
It's really a question for Robbie, isn't it? But I'll try to jump in. A lot of the current effort in the Dr. Racket side is pulling out the pieces that Dr. Racket does so that they can be used from different places. But I think a side effect of that is also making Dr. Racket itself more extensible. It's always been hackable in the sense that you can plug in tools that just override methods of the class and do things. But that's a very large API to jump into. And I think we're gradually finding better extension points, pulling things out where they'll be documented more clearly and separately. I've touched a little bit more of this myself as I worked on the expression editor and made it use reuse indenting and things like that Dr. Racket's using. So we hope that Rhombus efforts will trigger things like that, continue to trigger things like that as we go forward. So there's certainly interest. You probably, whoever asked the question probably has something specific in mind. But in the general sense of, is there interest in making it easier to plug into Dr. Racket? Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I would mention here is that Dr. Racket has gotten a lot more hackable, in particular with the introduction of Quick Script as a fundamental Dr. Racket feature. You can find quick scripts that do tons of different things. Quick scripts have access to large portions of Dr. Racket's internals, and you can write a new quick script, reload it without reloading, restarting Dr. Racket, and run it and do a lot of the kinds of customization and custom tasks that other editors also support using QuickScript. So that's a really powerful feature for hacking Dr. Racket, even if it doesn't let you sort of change the fundamental behaviors, it can script and run those behaviors very easily.
Yeah, and to comment a little bit about what Matthew said on the idea of Dr. Racket exposing its core more, that's becoming really, really useful for the Racket language server. So I manage the repository for that, and there's another group of contributors that manage a VS Code extension, Magic Racket, that works really well. And I think that all these avenues are just in the right direction. And Greg Hendershot is also doing a lot of work with Robbie on taking some of the GUI only pieces of Dr. Racket and separating those out. So I don't know, I think that we are going to see a lot of things differently there in the future. Anyone else want to say anything more about this point?
I want to add a point that Robbie made a long time ago when I brought up the same point, or similar point. That's a decade-old remark of Robbie's, but I think he still believes in that. Dr. Racket is an idea, and it is not the ideal IDE for everybody. But the ideas that are in there, some of the ideas are in there, were at the time Robbie created them were pretty novel. And his hope is that it's more like that other people will take these ideas and put them into other IDEs. So my own students, I give my students in almost all my courses, freedom of choice in terms of programming language. Racket is one of the things they choose. I almost never see Dr. Racket used, but almost always VS Code. And then I often ask, could you mouse over, you can see where the variable flows? Because there are no arrows. That's an idea missing to this day. And that would be really cool if somebody took that and put it in the language server. So we can actually have the same kind of flow arrows or rename arrows and tail call arrows or macro arrows that we have in Dr. Racket. So I want to push this the other way around on behalf of Robbie. There's a bunch of great ideas still in this IDE. Guys, take it and put it somewhere else too. And of course, there's also Tony Garner-Jones, who years ago took some of the ideas and started building a new Emacs instead of writing his dissertation. So you can do that. You can do that too.
Okay, so
it's called RMax, of course, because for Racket Max, All
right, so there's quite a few other questions that have come in. So I'll MC those. So the first one is it possible for the RacketCon selection procedure to be more transparent? I know it's meant to be informal, but clear expectation would be very nice, especially to newcomers who have not given a talk before. As a concrete example, after I was told the schedule was full for 2 weeks, Jesse Alamo was still inviting people to submit talks, which is confusing and unfortunate. At the very least, I hope there should be an announcement when the schedule is full. So this is definitely a question for me about how those things were done. So the way that I, assembled the RacketCon schedule was, I solicited talks and then gradually filled up the set of people that could speak. And I didn't do any coordination with anybody else. And so, yeah, I didn't make an announcement when the schedule was full because, I wanted to, see if there were any more things out there, if there were any, last minute additions. And, I'm sorry if it didn't feel great. I think that my personal taste is that it's hard to organize something like this in a quote fully transparent way. I think that, program committees for research conferences don't work that way and whatnot, but maybe that's me being an old fuddy-duddy about that. Do you guys have any opinion about this?
I don't know of any conference that has a transparent organization. If somebody can point us to a transparent organization, please do so.
And we're not trying to say, I assume that Matthias is not trying to say that in the sense of, you know, people don't do this, so shut up. I think of it more.
No. I'm asking for advice.
Yeah, I don't even know how you would do it.
Yeah.
So if there's like another model, I think that it would be interesting to know what it is. But honestly, I think that, you know, an issue that I have with the idea of a transparent thing is that, you know, some people, they say at the beginning that they want to do something, and then, you know, this life gets in the way and they have to cancel and whatnot. And the more transparent it is, I don't know, I would feel like the more embarrassing it would be to not deliver. So I think that there's value on both sides to this. But, you know, I would say that it may seem like, I don't know, there's some special club or something to get inside of RacketCon, but it is absolutely not like that. Many people, you know, have not done talks before who are involved in RacketCon. I mean, both last year and this year, and in the past, we've had people who are, you know, undergrad students presenting for the first time. And I am always in search of more talks rather than less when I organize it. Matthew or Sam, do you want to say anything about this? No. Okay, so the next question someone asks from YouTube, this is a YouTube user. They say they've got lots of math library extensions that they're sitting on and things that they see are missing that they wish were there. In particular, integrating with some existing like linear algebra and other math libraries like OPLAC and BLAS and whatnot. And you know, what's our opinion about integrating these into the official math library? Sam, will you answer this?
So I would say that my most important thought about this is that none of the four of us are the maintainers of the math library. So Jens Axel and Pavel are the most important people to talk about that, but I'm confident that they're excited about contributions and they've been doing a great job integrating contributions that people have to the math library. So I think more of that would be great.
Yeah, and when it comes to like integrating with low-level libraries, I think in general, we always want that to be an optional piece, mainly because it can be hard to maintain across all the many different platforms that that Racket supports. But, you know, like Sam said, if you have a cool function that is sitting on your hard drive somewhere that you think other people would like, then there should be a package for that, or there should be a way to integrate it into an existing package. The way that we all improve is by, you know, getting all of these things, you know, pulled out of, you know, private stuff and out into the world where everyone can see them.
In the specific case of libraries like BLAS, we just need to set up a package for the main platforms. And here I mean basically Windows and Mac that don't necessarily have them. And our experience has been that has worked. It's been pretty manageable. We upgrade them not too fast. They don't need to be upgraded too fast when they're things like BLAS. So I would say, yeah, that's still a workable approach, even if we have to set up some new native packages.
And there's a lot of infrastructure for how to deal with this that my guess is that is a little bit foreign to like a casual Racket contributor, but they could hook up with you, for instance, Matthew, and get walked through the process, and you know, we could even take it over.
Yeah, absolutely. And these libraries may already be available. I don't actually know.
Okay, so the next question, are there any plans for moving away from the benevolent dictator for life governance to something like a steering council or more similar to Rust?
So I think there's two questions there. So one is, is there a particular person who's in charge of everything in Racket currently? And then the other question is, how is that group of people chosen? And I would say currently, it's definitely the case that there's a group of people who make decisions for the Racket project, sometimes referred to as Racket Management or the Racket leadership team. So that's the 4 people here right now, as well as Robbie Findler and John Clements. So then sometimes it might seem like Matthew is the one who's in charge of everything, but that's just because he does all the work. But he listens to us on occasion, even about all of the great work that he does. But in seriousness, really we do meet regularly, talk about things, and it's a group effort to make decisions for the Racket project. So then the other question is, how is that set of people selected? So I think in one sense, it's very much like the Rust core team in that we, the existing core team, choose people to add to it. Most recently, John Clements, who's also the Racket release manager. And that's the same way that many other project leadership teams work, such as the Rust core team. The big difference between the Racket core team and many others is that the set of people who are in charge has stayed the same over a really long period of time. So Jay and I are the people who started working on Racket most recently of the Racket core team in I think 20 years ago now. So that's a big difference. And I think this is something we've talked about a lot, about whether having more people who have not been involved in Racket for the last 20 years as part of the core team would be beneficial for Racket. I think there's reasons to come down on both sides of that. I think rehearsing that debate here is not going to be super productive, but if you have thoughts about that, then I would strongly encourage you to talk to me or talk to other people in the Racket leadership, whether that's because you think things should change generally, things shouldn't change, whether there's particular people that you think should be more influential in Racket decision-making, whether that's yourself or other people. I'm very much interested to hear people's thoughts.
Yeah, and let me just add a little bit to that, Sam, which is that, the core question is, are there plans moving away? And are we thinking about this? The answer is absolutely yes, we are thinking about this. We talk about this all the time, but we don't have anything, we don't have any concrete plan or anything to announce. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, Sam, that we are constantly talking about this, but we honestly don't know the right way to do it. And
yeah, I would say that this is something we've talked about, but there are not any plans to change things currently. But this is something I continue to think about for Racket, and it's obviously an important topic for Racket leadership as it goes forward. So that's that's something we think about, but there's no current plans to change things, to add any particular new people or change how this set of people is determined at the moment.
Yeah, Matthias?
I think we can interpret the question a little bit differently and maybe give a more precise answer. The people on the leadership, in the leadership council, whatever you call this, are the people who have intellectually grown this language from the very bottom of #% kernel all the way to type Racket and Racklog and and data log and you name it. They have financed this thing over 25 years. They have held the group together for that long. They have projected in the education community and built a huge education clientele. And it's just a natural thing, the way academia grows groups. Over the last 10 years in particular, the language has become a product that is used way beyond the original target group. Maybe even longer, but it's definitely 10 years of that as far as I can tell. Because when we founded RacketCon, we had 2 days. One day was entirely about education, and the other day was about something technical. And then slowly, the education dropped out and it became more technical. So in the spirit of language leadership, this is a research project, and we are language researchers, and the core language grows based on the ideas that different people inject into Racket from here. So that leadership is definitely something that will remain at the forefront of research. It's not easy to integrate people who come from a very different angle at this language. On a completely different end of the spectrum, there is the social community, the community around Racket. We call this social Racket. And again, over the last 5 years, Stephen DeGabriel, for example, and other people have pushed to have meetings organized outside of this core group, have made significant contributions to the Racket repos. For example, the templates came up yesterday after Stephen and Lindsay's talk. Great idea, right? We have the core group has asked other people to take on the leadership of repos. Sam just mentioned that we have people managing the math library. Other people have taken over plot. And there's a few other repos that just factored out. So when this grows, as this grows, what I can foresee and what I'd like to see a lot more is a social Racket council. And how much that overlaps with us, the intellectual language leadership thingy, is a question that will be decided as these two groups grow. But here's a concrete example. I'm not sure Jay should actually be the organizer of RacketCon. If we have people stepping forward, taking over that labor, taking over the process, making it transparent, I think Jay and all 6 of us would love to see that and would say, thank you, please take it on, right? So I think there's 2 ways of looking at leadership. And that second way is is wide open for anybody who wants to step forward and help us out. And then there has to be some coordination between those 2. And I'm sure that will grow out too. Other communities have figured out how to grow it. We'll figure it out too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to end this question on, Matthias. And
can I not end it? But
no, go ahead.
A less precise follow-up to Matthias. I think one thing I see happening with Rhombus, and that's a kind of goal, is opening up more space on the intellectual side for people who want to contribute to the language design. And I'm seeing people step into more leadership and direction there than we have in the past, just because maybe there's a little bit more room. So that's a small thing. It may pan out, it may not, but that's a direction to keep in mind.
Yeah. And I love what you mentioned about having me not do RacketCon. I think that, in Europe, Jesse Alama is doing an amazing job setting up his Racket Fest stuff. And I think that that's going to be great going forward. Let's move on to the next question. The next question says, going forward, will Racket be marketing itself as a general purpose programming language as well as a DSL development workbench? Maybe this responsibility has been offloaded to Rhombus. My gut reaction to this question is that I don't like the question because the idea that it feels like it's saying as opposed to a DSL workbench. And I would say that I've always thought of Racket as being a general purpose programming language. And the fact that it's great for making DSLs is one of the, just a great taste.
Let me say something. I think we should see the question as follows. Every language has a slogan, has an idea that drives it forward as, hey, we are general purpose language, but we are distinct from other languages because of X. Let me take an example from the academic world. Haskell has the idea that we are lazy and we have a type system that blows people's mind. Well, it did until recently. Now, dependent types blow people's mind. But that's the idea in academia, right? Take something like Python. Python came up as ABC, as an educational language, and then became this very clean code, one way to do it, and it's everything like looks elegant. It's pseudocode on Rails or whatever it's called exactly. Java was an explicit attempt to take over as an industrial language, not as an academic that grew out. And so Java as an industrial language came out. Nothing that isn't at least 10 years old goes into the design, but it has to be reasonably safe on the type level and memory safe. And let's see how far we get with that, right? So every language comes with a philosophy. And almost all these languages are general purpose languages. And in this spirit, Racket was a general purpose language, but because of what we wanted to do with it, we needed the tools to build other languages quickly inside that language. So our differential point, our difference from everybody else is we emphasize building languages within the language. And Rhombus is an amazing example because now we're moving away, just like, actually we have done this before. Look at Jay's data log. We're moving away from ugly, from pretty syntax and go to ugly syntax. And it'll be just great, because the tools are ready. And Matthew fills the gap where the tools are not ready. So there's no contradiction. It is just our separate, our leading slogan. What you could ask, and this is a different question that may have come up when I couldn't watch the Gather Town thingy, platforms. Real general purpose languages run on every damn platform, including the web, including the phones and embedded devices and cockroach devices and whatever they're called. We don't quite run there yet, but we'd love to see people come in, join our group, and port them. So we're working as a subgroup, like Sam is leading a subgroup that is looking at Racket script, making a language like Racket on the web, and maybe even going to WebAssembly. So that's a really cool question in the general purpose direction, but don't oppose those things. They're just the same.
The next question says, there are lots of issues on the GitHubs, on the GitHub repositories that are like erroneously posted, where basically Racket Racket and Racket Dr. Racket become kind of like the dumping ground for everything, even though it belongs in another repository. Do we perceive this as a problem? And if it is a problem, how can we remedy it? What do you think, Matthew?
So I think I'm probably the right person to answer this question. So I would say mostly, I don't think this is a problem. Particularly for people who are new to Racket, the organization of GitHub repositories is not something that I want to require before people report issues. So if all you know is that you installed Racket and there was a problem, then I want to hear about the issues that you report, and if you report that on the wrong repository, then that's not a big deal. So for some things, I think that's just the end of the story, and they can get fixed or get addressed, and then you've closed the issue and you're done. For other things where it's going to be around longer, or it makes a difference for tracking things, or there's going to be a big discussion, then it's worth moving that issue to the correct repository, and anyone who has commit access to the relevant repositories can move those between them.
And please move them.
Yeah, and if there's something in particular that you want moved, then feel free to ping me or anyone else on Discord or on Slack and say, this seems to be on the wrong repository and it's easy to move. But in terms of initial reporting, I don't think there's a problem with things all going in the same bucket.
The next question is, are there any plans to eventually sunset BC to reduce the maintenance / new feature burden? Follow-up, any thoughts on improving multi-core places and whatnot? Does CS change anything? Matthew?
I spend most of my time on an ARM64 machine, so BC is already not useful to me. So it's half sunset as far as I'm concerned. I think there'll be some natural point where something becomes too hard and we just want to add it to BC and it'll just be in CS. And there'll be eventually another natural point. So I don't see setting a specific sunset date in the near future, but I think that'll happen on the scale of a decade or so. Just a wild guess.
Yeah. Great. So we are now after, we were supposed to end at 1:30, and it's now 1:36. So let's end the live stream part and we'll go back to the hallway track. And the next session will start at 2:30. That's in 1-ish hour from now, 55 minutes. No, sorry, yeah, about like 5 minutes. And that's where we'll go next. And the rest of the day is all about like sort of like reports on the Rhombus project where we are so far and discussion about that. So we'll see you all in the gather and we'll see you all again in about an hour. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.